Hello and welcome to Cooking the Books with Heather. On this week's episode, we are going to be making cornmeal fried okra with Tabasco mayo out of Ashley Christensen's Poole's Diner cookbook. Have to say, I have made this before. It is actually a really easy recipe. It was a lot easier than I expected. So the first step in this recipe is to make the Tabasco mayo. Now, I did make this basic cider mayo with my immersion blender, and I recorded it this time, and we're gonna have that as a separate video, so I'll link that down below. And I've already reduced the hot sauce. Now, she calls for Tabasco. We had a very large jar of Texas Pete in the refrigerator, so that's what we used instead of Tabasco for this. But so we reduced this by half. I checked it a few times. It took me about 15 minutes of simmering, and it turns into a very sort of, in the pan when it's still warm, it's sort of a very thin ketchup-y consistency. It gets a lot thicker than the hot sauce. You smell the vinegar when that's happening, just so you know. I did not measure this. It says that the cider mayo makes a cup and a half, and we're supposed to have 2 cups for this recipe. It really looks more like 2 cups to me. It's about half of this quart, which is 2 cups. So we're just gonna put the reduced hot sauce into the full batch of basic cider mayo that we just made. So, and I'm just going to stir it up in this jar, and we will have that. All right, so I'm just gonna try to get this stirred in as best I can. You could use a whisk, and that would probably be a lot easier than this, but I'm just gonna stir it up. She says to stir it. All right, so that is the Tabasco, or Texas Pete in our case, mayo that we are going to dip our cornmeal fried okra into after we make it. We'll be back to make the okra. Okay, so keep an eye on my oil temperature. It's still coming up, but it's almost there. I have my okra. I have trimmed off the very tip of the ends where it was kind of, brown, and then sliced them in half lengthwise. And I have some peanut oil here because that's kind of what I had a lot of, and go ahead and use it because I used it for the fried okra that I made out of the Deep Run Roots cookbook. And so at the end, we'll do a little comparison, I think. Here I have some cornmeal with salt, and that's all that's in here. We have some white cornmeal for this because I was out of cornmeal, and odds are my husband could find it at the grocery store. So I usually buy yellow, but we have white this time. And then this is just plain buttermilk. So we're going to put some of this in the buttermilk. And it doesn't have to soak, we're just getting it coated with the buttermilk so that we can make the cornmeal stick. I'm going for 325 degrees on this oil. Not quite there, but I've got my burner up pretty high, so it's going up pretty quickly. I'm going to turn it down a little bit because that's about where I keep it when I'm frying. Excuse my new crew member who might show herself. I'm going to try to keep one dry hand and one wet hand while I do this, because I'm going to do this mostly with my hands because it's just so much easier. But I will have to wash my hands a lot in between. But so we're going to get a batch in here. It should take 3 to 4 minutes to fry. Yeah, we're about there. So I'm going to try to make my right hand my dry hand because I'm right-handed and I have better control there. So I'm just going to get this okra all coated with buttermilk. And then we are going to drop it in the cornmeal and get it all coated. And then try Try to make sure I don't have too much on there, and put it in the oil to fry. So she says either just a heavy bottom saucepan like this, or a Dutch oven. It's just easier for us to wash these, so Dutch ovens are kind of a pain in the tuchus if you don't actually need them. And there's plenty of oil in here. All right, now I'm gonna put some more in my cornmeal just to get a nice batch going. And I'm going to drip all over my stove while I do this, but that's okay. So just trying to put them in where there's no other pieces of okra, so it won't like stick to it. And I think we can probably get all of this into one pan. Let's see. All right. And I've got a baking sheet back there with paper towels just ready for this to be put on there when it is done. And I'm supposed to be turning this, and I will, when I'm done with getting all of it in here, I will turn it to make sure it gets brown on both sides, because you know, sometimes, especially when it's not round, it won't turn itself over. But I think that's probably as much as I can do in a batch. I'm gonna wash my hands and be right back. So I have tongs, and I'm just gonna make sure that my okra is getting fried well on both sides, and when it is golden brown everywhere, it is done. And it should not take that long to cook, honestly. Might be a little bit low. Just want to manage your temperature pretty well. And she does not tell you to salt these when they come out of the fryer, which often, even though you've salted the breading, people will tell you to do that. But, so I'm not gonna bother. And hopefully that'll be good. I was really, really shocked the first time I made these that the cornmeal stuck as well as it does without anything but some buttermilk. But it does. It works really well. All right. So I think this piece is pretty brown on both sides. So I'm going to call that done and take it out. And she says to basically keep it going and serve it fresh and hot to your guests with the Tabasco Mayo, and just sort of keep serving up, keep frying batches and eating them as you can. These are really, really delicious, honestly. We had them from the restaurant recently, so we'll be able to compare and contrast. You can see that they really do. The cornmeal makes a really good coating on it. All right, that's my first batch done. I'm going to basically just keep doing the exact same thing until I have fried up all of my okra. If you want, you can turn your oven to 200 degrees-ish and just put these in there and they will stay warm for a while. That's what we did with the deep run roots fried okra. But yeah, that should work just fine. I think I'm gonna do probably about 3 batches here. Just, that's how much it will take. Go ahead and start getting these in here. But yeah, that's it. And we will be back and let you know what we thought of these and how they stacked up to the deep run roots ones and how they stacked up to the ones at the restaurant. episode of Cooking the Books with Heather, you watched me make cornmeal fried okra with Tabasco Mayo from Ashley Christensen's Poole's Diner cookbook. And like I said, I had made this previously and was very surprised by how well it turned out and how easy it was, because often battering and frying things is a difficult process. But this turned out really great. The buttermilk makes the cornmeal stick. It all fried up just as she said. It was super easy. Unlike the deep run roots recipe that we did, and for this recipe, you cut the okra in half lengthwise. So there are a few more pieces, but still easier than the standard Southern recipe where you fry it in sort of coin type pieces. So yeah, I would definitely make this recipe again because, well, if I have buttermilk on hand, which often now I do, and I'm looking for something to use it up with. And so this is a good way. And in fact, I used the method and made fried green tomatoes because it's now October. I think it was September when we first made this. And anyway, it's now October and I was pretty much done with my tomato plants, but there were a few green ones left, and I decided to use this method to make fried green tomatoes, which is one of the pictures in the book. She has the okra and then also some fried green tomatoes with it. It worked out just as well for the tomatoes. So, and it has ingredients that I generally have on hand, at least for the coating is cornmeal and sugar. And that is easy. It was crispy, it was crunchy, it was salty. It was great. So it uses a little bit less. I think they're fried pretty much the same as the deep run roots recipe, but I used probably less oil for this in a more shallow pan because that's easier for me. And this was a little bit less prescriptive as to exactly how you should fry it. And I try to follow the recipes as well as I can. Also, the Tabasco Mayo it's really good. It's too spicy for the kids because, kids. But you could obviously, just like with the ranch ice cream in the other recipe, you could dip these in whatever you want. You could make any other sort of creamy dipping sauce, or you could use ranch dressing. And if you want to dip them, have something else to dip them. And following this recipe, it turned out almost exactly like the okra that we had from the restaurant. So we ordered some not long before we made this, and it was very comparable. So this is something you can make at home that will taste just like the restaurant. And I made the mayo with my immersion blender, and I will link the recipe. I showed you guys how I did that. I'll link that above, and that was super easy, definitely easier than the ranch ice cream, because the ice cream maker is always a bit of a wild card, right? So if you enjoyed watching me make this, please give me a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and come back and watch me make something else.